Modern Warfare 3, one of the most divisive Call of Duty games in a long time leading up to release. But now that the dust has settled, the question is this game a $70 scam? Today we're going in depth and ranking each individual mode 2 months after launch. Let's dive in. Campaign. The alleged 16-month dev cycle that Sledgehammer was given to complete this game is no secret. And the campaign is by far the mode most affected by this tight deadline. With an average of only 4 hours to complete, it's the shortest campaign to date. And to be honest, even that 4 hours is a bit generous if you don't drag your feet during the open world segments. This year, they added new open combat missions to the game, which, in contrast to the standard linear missions, drops you into an open level, usually just a repurposed section of a Warzone map, and you need to scavenge for weapons and equipment to accomplish the objective. On paper, this sounds like a refreshing new take on the single player formula, and something they've never done before. A fusion between Modern Warfare 2's mission alone, where you needed to scavenge from literally nothing, and Black Ops 3's single player create a class, where you build your loadout before each mission with weapons you found in earlier missions. In practice, however, the objectives were generic, like one mission that has you sneaking around a shipping yard to press a button on a shipping crate, or another mission that has you sneaking around a crash site to press a button on some phone data. And the freedom of choice the open world offered was mostly non-existent, because most missions were built around stealth first, shoot second strategy. Plus, the first time you played each mission, you were forced to use the default weapons, and you could only use previously found equipment on the same mission they were found, meaning that any kind of thoughtful loadout customization was reserved only for repeat playthroughs. This led to missions playing out like glorified Spec Ops, with some BR elements sprinkled in, like the parachute and weapon rarities. And with nearly half of the campaign's runtime devoted to this watered down mission type, it becomes clear that they were added as padding to fill out the story. Real quickly, this next section is going to be some spoilers, so if you haven't played the game yet, you might want to skip to the next section. The rest of the game had very worthwhile missions, like the Gulag and the new No Russian. And the best part of the entire story was the post-credit scene where Price kills Shepard, because it raised the stakes and actually showed Captain Price, this main character, doing something insane and awesome. But the game just ends after, and we'll need to wait another few years to see if they'll be able to stick the landing in the next campaign. Soap's death was also handled terribly, coming out of nowhere, and it feels like they just killed him because they needed to have something happen in the game. There was no buildup, and there was no time to connect with Soap's character in the entire 2 games beforehand, so it didn't hold any weight. If his name wasn't Soap and longtime fans didn't have a special connection to the original, no one would have cared. Makarov even escapes at the end, leaving 141 exactly where they were at the beginning. So the entire story ultimately went nowhere. It all shows a sad decline in this new trilogy's quality as each new installment releases, starting with Modern Warfare 19, which rebooted the franchise into this new grounded world with complex characters and believable stakes, coupled with fun, iconic missions like Clearinghouse, where you need to go floor by floor, checking rooms for the enemies. And even the more open levels were fun to play, and the story was top-notch. Then Modern Warfare 2 released in 2022, and they started taking on some water. The new and returning characters like Graves, Shepard, and Ghost were strong, but the plot began deteriorating with the dull villain and story beats that didn't make sense. The gameplay was still mostly fun and brought that classic COD feel to the table, and even introduced some interesting new ideas like the crafting system and backpack that ultimately were abandoned. There was that awful driving segment though, and far too much time spent in the AC-130. But then enters Modern Warfare 3 this year, where we're met with a repetitive story that goes nowhere, and the gameplay that feels dated and hollow, with very few, if any, positives to lean on. It all makes sense given the short turnaround the devs had to make this game. But ultimately, that doesn't change the fact that it isn't a very good single player at all. So, if you play COD for the campaign, do not buy this game. It's a 2 out of 10 from me. If you really want to see it though, I do have a playthrough on my live, on my channel. Check it out, watch it, let me know what you think. Multiplayer. Multiplayer is where things get interesting. They made some great moves, reverting nearly everything that Modern Warfare 2 broke, and actually made a pretty good multiplayer experience. Slide canceling, red dots on the minimap, and dead silence are all back, answering many of the fans' biggest complaints, making the gameplay feel more like COD again, and it's fun. Movement-wise, it's fast, but not as crazy as 2019. So depending on which side of the movement meta fence you're on, they found a pretty good middle ground. The maps from 2009's MW3 hold up pretty well for me, with some of my favorites being Subbase, Afghan, Favela. That's right, Sumi. I like that map. And while some of the larger maps from MW3 like the rail still feel way too large, the return of map voting makes it so you're most likely to play the actual good ones, and others are effectively removed from the pool. But we need to address that every map on disc was either a full-on remake or a repurpose from somewhere else in that game. From 6v6 being made up entirely from those MW3 maps, to Ground War being cutouts from Urzikstan, and even the Soul War mode map being from Hideout, stitched together with Crossfire, and Countdown from COD 4. The maps are what's driving a lot of people's argument that the game is just a $70 DLC, as reports that these maps were originally meant to be released in MW2 as part of a year 2 drop. But when MW3 was greenlit, they moved them all over to this game instead. It'll never be officially confirmed by Activision or Sledgehammer, because that's not how businesses operate, but things like the entire MW2 sandbox, including weapons, equipment, and field upgrades, carrying forward into this game, and 0 new maps on launch, with new content only now dropping in post-launch seasons, definitely points to these rumors being true. Let's talk about that post-launch content quickly. So far in the first season, they've released 2 new 6v6 maps, one of which, Meat, offers a pretty solid alternative to Shipment with all the chaos that camo grinding and small player maps love, but with a layout that's a little more complex, making it, honestly, a welcome change up from another year of Shipment 24/7. MW3's post-launch has even seen an unprecedented number of events so far, with unique rewards, and some even having new modes and map reskins with their own theme, like Christmas High Rise or Shipmas, where you could have snowball fights, or you could fight over the ray gun on Satan's Quarry or Spore Yard, and a neon-lit, space-themed Rust named Tent and Ice. I don't know what it's called. Again, we're only 2 months into the game, but there's already so many fun and unique limited time modes that make the game feel alive. The counter to that, though, is the ever-present Call of Duty drip feed. This is the phenomenon where every year the game launches with a few base game modes, but saves other core features to release in post-launch season, rebranded as new content. For instance, how Gunfight is almost never available on launch and releases in the first few seasons instead? What are we doing? So far, MW3 seems to be following this trend to the T, with party modes, ranked play, and even headquarters all being packaged as Season 1 content. So it's looking like the majority of post-launch for this game will likely be made up of the same usual suspects we've come to expect over the last few years. Outside of core 6v6, the secondary modes don't seem to be getting a lot of love in season, as we still only have 3 original Ground War maps, and War mode still only having that single map for many of us has already gotten stale. Overall though, if you're a multiplayer guy, then chances are you're gonna think that this is a solid entry, and I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Zombies. Zombies was by far the most hated mode prior to release, and being the first Zombies mode to release under the Modern Warfare subtitle, Treyarch was under a lot of pressure to get it right. But what was initially disdain from the audience before release quickly turned to praise, as Modern Warfare Zombies actually turned out to be pretty good, combining aspects of Treyarch's first open world Zombies mode, Outbreak, with Infinity Ward's newest extraction mode, DMZ, to create something new That's something both casual and hardcore players could enjoy. Multiple squads of up to 3 infill onto the map, loaded with activities from destroying ether nest to laying siege on a mercenary stronghold, or simply completing contracts to earn points to spend on classic zombie stuff like perks, weapon upgrades, and even kill streaks. The game can be as simple or as complicated as you're comfortable with. You can just drop in to level up your weapons, running trains at exfil sites, or grind out contracts in the low threat zones to make some quick cash. But there's so much more to the Modern Warfare Zombies iceberg if you go searching, like story missions, dark ether rifts, free perk Easter eggs, the blood burner, dog houses, bosses, and so much more. This layer of choosing your own difficulty also comes out in the map itself, with the outer edges being low threat zones, and as you work your way in, the zombies get stronger, but the rewards get better. It's a great place to just throw on some music and chill while leveling up weapons for multiplayer. And even the camo grind is pretty good, with an entirely separate Zombies Mastery camo, that being Borealis, and it might be one of the coolest camos to date. The map's redesign looks great too. Unlike Outbreak, the devs went all out in transforming Urzikstan from its standard Warzone look to a post-apocalyptic decaying city with fog and weather effects that change depending on the threat level. It really does combine the best of the DMZ with the best of Outbreak. And while I still prefer round-based to this open world extraction mode, they did a great job given the time they had. Now, it's not perfect though. The dreaded 45-minute timer that many predicted would be the mode's downfall takes a lot of the wind from its sails. Forcing you to exfil every 45 to 60 minutes completely throws pacing out the window. And because exfilling doesn't allow you to keep perks or weapon upgrades for your next deployment, the mode can sometimes feel pointless. Like everything you're doing to bulk up your character has no purpose because it'll just be gone in an hour anyway. But even with these issues, Modern Warfare Zombies is fun to play, and the devs are taking a page from DMZ's playbook by releasing new missions and content for each season. So it's only going to grow and evolve from here. So Zombies gets an 8 out of 10. Lastly is Warzone. Now, I was a huge Warzone guy in the past, but the maps and overall feel of Warzone 3.0 just feel okay to me. Like multiplayer, a lot of missteps of last year's release have been smoothed out over the past few months. And with the MW3 integration, even things like movement have been updated to the new feel. It all is a lot more responsive, and it really feels like we're slowly getting back on track with constant communication with Raven Software, who have taken over control of the game back from Infinity Ward's clutches. The map this year, Urzikstan, feels like a return to form too, with a lot of similarities to Verdansk in both setting and layout. Resurgence is as fast-paced as ever, supporting both Vondel and Ashika in a rotating playlist, which adds a lot of much-needed variety. But Ashika Island needs to go away forever. That map sucks. Plus, Plunder and Lockdown also make its return in its own limited time playlist, swapping in and out to help you level up your weapons and grind events, making Warzone feel like a complete varied mode once again. I do have a few gripes with the core gameplay though. Audio is some of the worst this game's ever seen. It's so bad that community members have started making their own filters that compress the audio down to hear footsteps better and are selling them to players, effectively making this game on PC pay to win. But worse, you're not even paying Call of Duty to win anymore. Sound really has to be tuned and fast. ULA registration is still wildly inconsistent for me. Sometimes you'll get 5 or 6 shots into an enemy before they somehow 2-shot you because the server tick rate is still so much lower than the industry standard. BR needs unlimited tac sprint. Like it or not, a large part of Warzone is running across the map, chasing gunfights, and running from the gas. The quickest way to make that part of the gameplay loop tiresome is literally making your character tired and needing a break every few seconds. The crux of most of these issues stems from trying to achieve parity between modes, where things work the same across the entire game, but that idea doesn't lend itself to making any individual mode well balanced. Just because something works in multiplayer or zombies doesn't mean that that mechanic has to transfer to Warzone and vice versa. VR can play different than multiplayer, and that should be okay. Now, this might sound like a bit of a crazy opinion, but from a more casual standpoint now, I kind of miss Blackout. Right now, with loadouts and some weapons standing head and shoulders above the rest, if you don't adopt the current meta, you're not going to win in Warzone. But in Blackout, everyone was on the same playing field because everything was found in ground loot. The same guns, the same attachments, the same perks were all found on the ground. And it was more about knowing how to use whatever you found to your advantage and adapt to your ever-evolving loadout, and less about building a recoilless MTZ interceptor and using it only that until the devs nerf it in a few weeks. Maybe they could work on a casual mode without loadouts, similar to Fortnite's no build mode that revitalized a good chunk of that community, and it could do wonders here for those who want a more traditional battle royale experience. I would honestly recommend waiting a little bit on Warzone if you were a fan of the old days. With Rebirth, Fortune's Keep, and even Verdansk coming later this year, I'm sure we'll be eating good soon. But for now, Warzone is just like a 6 out of 10. This is the one mode that's not behind that $70 paywall though. So if you're bored and have a few hundred gigs of space burning a hole in your hard drive, it doesn't hurt to try for yourself. From a top-down perspective like this, and with only 16 months to make an entire Call of Duty game, Sledgehammer, Treyarch, Raven, and all the other studios involved with Modern Warfare 3 did a much better job than they're given credit for. Modern Warfare 3 may not be the greatest COD to ever exist, but it's not nearly as bad as a lot of reviewers have claimed it to be upon release. I think it's definitely a 7 out of 10 Call of Duty. Weak in some areas like the campaign and Warzone, but MW3 continues to be some of the best multiplayer in a while and serves as a worthy appetizer, holding us over until Treyarch's big next project in 2024, Black Ops Gulf War. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about Modern Warfare 3 in the comments, and if you've even bought the game already. We'll see you in the next one.